Good morning. I have my voice back. I don't know if that's good or bad. God bless you. Well, today is the 34th Sunday in Ordinary Time. It is the last Sunday of the liturgical year. It is also called the Solemnity of our Lord Jesus Christ, King of the universe. What this solemnity is about has to do with the ultimate questions that we all have to ask ourselves at some time before we die. To whom or for whom will we live our lives? Now, this special day was instituted a long time ago in 1925 by the then reigning Pope, Pope Pius XI, who was very concerned about the state of world affairs in the years following World War I, because what he noticed were several things brewing on the horizon, and they didn't look good. In the early 1920s, Mussolini marched on Rome, and he formed a fascist government. Stalin ruled with an iron fist in the Soviet Union as the Soviet dictator. In the early 1920s to mid-1920s, we start hearing rumblings of a young man in Germany who is starting to gain a lot of followers, Adolf Hitler. I think, to say the least, there was a lot of concern, a lot of fear, a lack of hope, feeling of helplessness that this is coming on and no one seems to be able to change things. These and other events prompted the Pope to have the Church ask herself every year, year after year, who holds the core authority of our lives? That is a really important question. Not too many years ago, in the year 2012, I went to the movies because I heard about this one movie which seemed to be pretty good, and I wanted to go to a movie which really had some meaning to it. The movie was called For Greater Glory. It starred Peter O'Toole and Andy Garcia, amongst others. It's now available on Netflix, $1.99, right in my budget. It is set in the 1920s. A totalitarian regime gained control of Mexico right after the revolution. And they tried to suppress the church. To resist the regime, many Christians band together to work against the Mexican government, who no longer permitted them free worship. It was not uncommon that, according to the laws of Mexico at that time, written in the Constitution, is that the church, especially the Catholic Church, clergy were not permitted to identify themselves as clergy. They were not to wear religious garb outside of the church building. And then eventually, it was outlawed to do what you're doing right now, to celebrate Mass. It was bitterly outlawed. And so these men and women band together to form an army to uprise against the government. And they took up the battle cry, Viva Cristo Rey. It means, Christ the King lives. The faithful Catholic Mexicans called themselves Cristeros. Among those who fought for the freedom to worship, among them, and this is very historical, the movie is actually very, very good historically. They mention a young boy. He was just turning 14. Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio. Jose wanted to fight for the cause, but since he was only shy of 14, he couldn't really carry a gun, but he carried the flag, a flag bearer, I guess you would call it. And the flag was the flag of Jesus Christ. He ultimately and sadly was captured. He was put into prison, into a dungeon. He even had family members try to coerce him and say, tell them what they want to know and then you'll get out. And he said, no. Viva Cristo Rey. Ultimately, the president and the government of Mexico threatened to put him to death because he refused to give them information and he refused to renounce his Catholic faith. I found that this movie, this courageous story, was absolutely captivating, especially considered his young age. He was no older than some of these guys here. Imagine them fighting in a war. But because he was captured, he wouldn't tell them information about where the base camp was located and who was involved. This is the part of the story which is hard to talk about. They tortured the boy, and they put him ultimately to death by government officials. As they tortured him, he was bleeding horribly and in intense agony and pain. Young Jose knelt on the ground. They dug a grave and made him kneel right at his grave. And after one last time, refusing to give the military names and locations of those in the Cristero movement, they shot him. After the military person shot him, he fell to the ground, but he was still conscious. He lay on the dirt, which is now soaked in his own blood. And while he's laying there, the movie portrays this very well. He takes his hand and he makes the sign of the cross on the mud in front of him. He told his mother, I love you. I love you deeply. And he cried out to his killers, I forgive you. And then shouted out with the last ounce that he had of energy, his decision for Christ. Viva Cristo Rey. That was his testimony of what his Catholic faith meant to him. And looking at one last time at the mud cross carved into the soil, which was now pooling with his own blood, he died as a boy martyr. The movie was purposely accurate to prove that there had been a great number of people who have had the courage to remain steadfast in their resolve for their faith in spite of great odds. It does not hinge on age. It has nothing to do with education level or prosperity. These men, women, boys, and girls chose to keep Jesus Christ and his church as the center of their hearts and their lives, no matter what. Because to lose Christ as the center meant to lose their family, meant to lose their nation, it meant to lose their soul by denying Jesus. I can only imagine how perplexed the Mexican soldiers, the federales, would have been having to witness this. And that's only one example from that movie, and in reality, of people who paid with their blood. There's another priest that was shown that they dragged him out of church. He was in full vestments, just like me. This guy was 77 years old. He was quite elderly, feeling he didn't have good health. And they dragged him off and stuck him before a wall. And they said, you have one last chance. Deny Christ. Deny the church. And he says, I will not do it. Viva Cristo Rey. And they did him in too. We call Christ our King. What does that mean? Kingship is somewhat of a foreign concept to you and me because we're Americans. We live in a democracy, not a kingdom. We elect our officials. They don't descend from a long line of a monarchy. But I would guess that even our vision of a king may be somewhat off a bit because there are so many people who think a king or a queen is a brutal authority. But the authentic idea of a king is one who was given their leadership position by Almighty God and is to govern their people with the deepest of love and affection, to be concerned about the people you lead, and ultimately that you would give your life for them. And this is the kingship of Jesus Christ that we remember and we evoke today. Jesus' kingship is based on a rule of truth, of love, and of mercy. And his kingdom is present until the end of time. In fact, it is present even now in the midst of our own lives, in the middle of the chaos and the fear and the sickness and the dying which is going around the world right now as we speak. Even in our own country, where faith in God is oftentimes mocked at and even despised by people. What you are doing right now, others would say is absolutely crazy. You're wasting your time. You should be going out for breakfast and forgetting about this silly nonsense. That's how some people really feel about faith. To find Jesus Christ and his kingdom, we need only to look and to listen for it by opening our eyes and being aware of his presence. If we just ask to be aware, Jesus Christ will allow you to feel his presence. I came to appreciate that movie for the greater glory because the characters all have an experience with God which could color their relationship with the Almighty. Among the cast of characters in the film, there were some where religion is just all about the exterior stuff. It's about the incense, it's about the bells, it's about the pretty church. And for them, that was it. There was no movement of the heart. For others, it's what we do only because mom and dad make us do this. How sad I become when I hear grown adults say, well, I don't practice my religion. I was baptized a Catholic, but my mother made me go to Catholic schools, made me go to daily Mass, made me go to Sunday Mass, made me go to religious education. And after about age 18, 19, I said, the heck with it all. And for them, they serve as abominable witnesses of faith because they never try to cultivate a real personal relationship with Jesus Christ. They forgot about the joy of our faith. Yes, there's responsibilities, but there's also joy. Look at family life. Hey, someone's got to do the laundry. Someone's got to clean the bathroom. Someone has to pick up after the dog outside. You know what I'm talking about, family responsibilities. But that's what makes us family. We're willing to share those responsibilities and to find the joy of being together and working together. That's why so many people love Thanksgiving Day. It's not so much about the turkey. It's about us as family gathering together, laughing, crying, telling stories, whatever it might be. But then there's that third category of people amongst the characters in the movie are those who see Jesus as the core and the reason of their lives. Much like the Cristieros of the 1920s, and what is more, their love for God blankets their entire lives. It helps them to be people who remain faithful even when times are horribly difficult. In the early 2000s, Pope John Paul II, and then later on, Pope Benedict XVI canonized several of the priests and lay adult people who showed courageous faith during those horrible days of the Mexican Cristero War. And that young boy, Jose Luis Sanchez del Rio, he was proclaimed a saint by Pope Francis only a few years ago in the year 2016. He became a saint all because he had the courage to choose not to turn his back on Jesus Christ and their Catholic faith. There's one beautiful scene where Jose and another young boy are there in the camp, and they're in their sleeping area, wherever they're sleeping on the ground. It's cold. They just had a little bit of something to eat, and then they had to go to bed, get ready to get up at the crack of dawn. And the one boy says to Jose, he goes, "Do you really believe this stuff? This stuff of God?" He goes, "Yeah, I do. I don't understand everything, but I do believe." And I think that's the question you and I need to ask ourselves today. It's not about how much you understand up here. It's about how this heart has been touched by God. So the question for you and to me on this Christ the King Sunday is this: what legacy will you and I leave this world when we die? Will others see us with a faith that contains joy and peace and generosity and conviction? Or will we only be remembered because of a favorite cookie recipe, or that we could run really well in football, or we got a big fancy college degree and we're executive business people? Those are great, but that can't be the core. The Solemnity of Christ the King challenges us to take a good hard look at ourselves and to live our faith solidly and with courage. Viva Cristo Rey.